Great. My name is Ben Simons. I'm the Executive Director and CEO of Telfair Museums. It is such a pleasure to be back in full swing with our event season and our Director's Circle cycle. I always say that the Director's Circle events are the only events where you can bring wine into the auditorium, so don't take advantage of that. Tonight, we thank you for joining us tonight for this Donor Appreciation Night. We're here to thank you for being Director's Circle members. You are the backbone of support for the museum, and you make everything that we do possible year-round. So thank you all for being Director's Circle members. And please tell your friends. Everyone has commented tonight that there's a great mix of new members and longtime members tonight, and it's just really, it's a sign of the vibrancy of this incredible organization that you all are all here tonight. So thank you. We want to dedicate tonight's lecture to a great friend, a great citizen who we lost this week. And many of us were at the service today, at the graveside service and the reception. Dale Crate Sr., an incredible citizen, friend, and leader, really at the heart of everything that's happened at Telfair over the last 50, 60 plus years. So I wanted to include the picture, particularly upright, of the three amigos, Bob Jepson, Bob Faircloth, Dale. Dale was friends with everyone, and he really made everyone feel special. We were all touched by him, and he made Savannah a better place in so many ways. So we're dedicating this lecture to our great friend Dale. Tonight's lecture is really the inspiration and is made possible by our major supporters, Bob and Alice Jepson and Ted and Linda Moore. So can we please thank them? The idea to host a lecture on the subject of the Black Prince actually had its roots pre-COVID, believe it or not. Ted and Linda have always been passionate admirers of our Black Prince painting, which is the focus of tonight's lecture. And they wanted to have a lecture on the painting by a historian. We had many different plans for this to happen during COVID, after COVID, and so we are delighted to welcome Dr. Livingston tonight to speak on the subject. I also want to put a plug in for our good friend and longtime Telfair volunteer supporter, leader Linda McWhorter. I'm wearing a tie with the crest, coat of arms of the Prince of Wales. Did I own this before about a month ago? No. Linda purchased it and brought it back from England as a gift to celebrate this evening tonight. So thank you, Linda. We also want to thank our exhibition sponsors for the Age of Armor exhibition, which is our headliner exhibition this summer. Major funding for the exhibition is provided by the Little John Family Foundation. And I know Angus is here tonight. Angus, where are you? There we are. Give a round of applause to Angus and Leslie for their 5-year support of our major exhibitions program. It's an inspiration. It's part of our strategic plan and our vision for the future of Telfair. And you really jumped in and made it possible for us to be able to have exhibitions like the Age of Armor. So thank you. Exhibition investment is also provided by the City of Savannah, by the Georgia Council for the Arts, and by Inga Brassler as well. So let's thank them. Annual exhibition support is provided by our Director's Circle Council, which is all of you. So we thank you for being part of the Director's Circle. And again, you are our ambassadors. We want you to recruit new Director's Circle members because it's so fun. We are so pleased to be able to host the Age of Armor at Telfair this summer. Tonight's lecture and donor appreciation dinner are a fitting way to close out our showcase exhibition. We especially want to thank Dr. Elise Gerstenecker. Elise, you are here with us tonight. Telfair's Curator of Decorative Arts, and the curatorial team for all their work in bringing this exhibition to the museum. It is really a pleasure to have it here. And now I would like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Michael Livingston. We're so grateful to Ted and Linda Moore for putting Dr. Livingston on Telfair's radar, and for facilitating him as tonight's speaker. Thank you, Ted and Linda. Dr. Livingston holds degrees in history, medieval studies, and English, and a long list of scholarly publications. 2 of his books have won distinguished book prizes from the Society for Military History: The Battle of Crécy, a case book, and Medieval Warfare, a reader. He's also an active novelist. In 2019, he starred in Contact, which aired on Discovery and Science channels worldwide. So he's a movie star as well. Future episodes of which will be filmed here at Telfair. Today, he serves as the Secretary General to the United States Commission on Military History, and he has been named Citadel Distinguished Professor. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Livingston.
No pressure. Thank you all so much for being here. This facility is extraordinary. And of course, the artwork you have nearby, I really like. This painting, which I think we're going to see tonight really closely, has captivated me for a long time, as has just the general story of the Battle of Crécy. This is something I first heard about when I was very, very young, heard about from a professor. Most everything he told me, it turns out, wasn't true. But I still thought it was a cool story. And it was one of the things that helped draw me to become a medievalist in the first place. And so I'm very, very grateful for the chance to talk with you all about, look, something I would talk to you about if you were foolish enough to be around me for 5 minutes anyway. So it's awesome to be invited to be in front of you, and you can't really go anywhere. So that's fantastic, and I am so pleased to be here. So thank you. This is going to come out of one of my books. This is a book that came out last year, Crécy, Battle of Five Kings. And I want to start with that, the idea of a battle in which you had this much sort of firepower on the field, right? Politically speaking, not to mention the military arms that are engaged at this engagement here. On one side, you have Edward III of England, King Edward III of England, who's no slouch. With him is the Black Prince. I kind of put him in red because he's important, as you know from that painting. But I'll talk about that in a minute. On the other side, so that's the English side, against him is an alliance of some pretty powerful people. You have King Philippe VI of France, Charles IV of the Romans, essentially the man who's going to become Holy Roman Emperor, Jean III of Majorca, and King John I of Bohemia. And I put him in red because he's rather important, because those are those two people, okay? So the Black Prince is in black, and King John of Bohemia is no longer breathing. So King John of Bohemia dies in this fight, and it's quite a famous thing that he does, which is why Julian Story made this absolutely extraordinary painting about the event. This is a very, very famous event, not only Crécy itself, but this, I'll say, supposed occasion on which the Black Prince finds the body of King John of Bohemia and is so moved by what he sees that he chooses to incorporate parts of King John of Bohemia's outfit, his kit, into that of the royal family of England. So actually, if you see tonight, if you go look at the painting, you'll see right there on the harness of the horse, Ich Dane has been painted there by Julian Story. That is supposedly a motto that King John, I keep saying supposedly because all this is untrue. Cat out of the bag. This is the motto that is taken by the Black Prince and subsequently becomes the motto to this day of the Prince of Wales. So, the man is Prince of Wales now, well, that's his motto, Ich Dane. Supposedly takes it from King John of Bohemia at this moment. That is false, but there it is. And here there's 3 ostrich feathers on this shield. Those 3 ostrich feathers are now the official kind of emblem, as it were, of the Prince of Wales, again, the Crown Prince of England. And supposedly he got them from this event. Also not true. Nor was he wearing black. All right. Just for the record, King John of Bohemia, again, he did die. That is solid correct, okay? He's 50 years old. He's 50 years old. Now the myth of Crécy, which becomes very large, as I'm already starting to indicate, consistently refers to him as old King John of Bohemia, which, given that he was 50 years old at my age, is not cool. We should not be calling him old King John of Bohemia, because that's me then. So, not good. But he was somebody who had a very veteran life. He was kind of the Chuck Norris of his age. He'd done a lot of stuff. And the other thing we know about him is he was, our sources say, chicken-eyed. He couldn't see very well. He couldn't see very well at all. He was essentially blind. But the sources say he was chicken-eyed. I've had all kinds of fun nights trying to figure out how chicken-eyed means that you're blind. And I've got lots of great theories. We really don't know why, but that's what they say. He was chicken-eyed. The man looking at him there, he was 16 years old and was not wearing black. Because he was not the Black Prince yet. He becomes the Black Prince, but he is not at this point. He is 16 years old, and he's never been in a fight. And he gets put in charge of the front line of the army at this engagement. The vanguard, we call it. He's put in charge of the front line, which is a bit of a thing to do to the young man. Not what I was doing at 16, but that's what he did. The helmet, by the way, that he's wearing is fantastic. I love that helmet so much. Story, you nailed it. Upstairs, I went and looked at it this afternoon, in the Age of Armor exhibit, is a so-called pig-faced bassinet that is close to that. And it is something I stared at for a while because I'm that kind of person. So it's really, really cool, and definitely you should check it out. It's very, very amazing. So this is one of the reasons I love being here, because of this story. Now what I want to do, as I've already kind of started to indicate, is tell you kind of like what really happened, right? This is a mythic event, and I want to sort of explain, what I think happened and why I think it happened, why I think we can kind of know something about it beyond the myth. This is how medieval people imagined this fight. This is from the manuscript Cotton Nero, E Part 2, folio 152 verso, for those following at home. It's a manuscript in the British Library. But it is beautiful. That is gilding, all that yellow gold color you see there, that is gold. That is gold that has been put on the manuscript, showing, in fact, what an important event this was, because those are 2 kings that are smashing at each other. This was royal conflict, and so it is in gold, and it is magnificent. It's part of the 100 Years' War. I'm not going to go through the whole history of the 100 Years' War. You're welcome. Put enough alcohol in me and you'll never get the end of it. England versus France, 1337 to 1453. Those are the typical dates. I say the standard dates everybody accepts for the 100 Years' War. The book I'm working on right now says that's a lie, but that's okay. So it's England versus France. I've given you some maps there to sort of show how this fight kind of goes over time. Green is English holdings. Orange is the French, and you can see this was a fight that over the course of, in the dates given here, 116 years, is very much back and forth. The bloodshed in the 100 Years' War is absolutely extraordinary. This is a horrific time, and smack dab in the middle of it, as if it all wasn't going grand enough, was the Black Death. So this is quite a time of history, and that's part of the reason I find it personally very fascinating, because boring times in history are wonderful to live in, not so much fun to study. The ones that are fun to study are where things are happening, and a lot happens here. This is a fight that we'll see Joan of Arc. This is a fight that sees a lot of things that you're familiar with, culturally somehow. The Band of Brothers speech, right, that Henry V gives at Agincourt, that gives us the name of the Band of Brothers show and things like that. That's 1415, Agincourt. The battle we're going to be looking at here is 1346. It's at the early stage of all of this. And the story of that battle begins with the landing of an English army in what we would call France. Edward III, at the head of that army, said, "It's my home, they just don't know it yet." That's a thing that invaders tend to do. And he lands way over here. These are dates. They're in flip order from the way we do it because my publisher is European. So I was like, but we do it the other way, and they said they had to do it this way. So this is the here where the first landing occurs, and the English march along this route, I should say, because a lot of it's not roads, march all the way, and that's where the battle occurs. This is a long way that they march across foreign territory, like enemy territory. Nobody is excited to see them. Nobody's excited to see them, despite what Edward had said, that, oh, they'll welcome me because I'm so awesome. No, the French were not happy that the English were there. And so they fought them along much of this route in some fairly significant engagements. Extraordinary fights happen in Caen, for instance, and in a place called Blanchetaque, which is right before the battle. Much of that is forgotten because the battle that happens in that red circle, because that event is so massive and reverberates across Europe. The fact that all this other stuff happened is kind of irrelevant at that point. It overrides everything. And no shock, because you had 5 kings on that battlefield. And it goes very distinctly one way. Right? I showed you, the English are one, and there's 4 other kings there, and they're on the other side. They're the ones that lose. The English win this fight and win it big. It is a massive victory. So massive, in fact, that the English march on up to a place called Calais, which is an enormous port, and they're able to lay siege to it. It takes a year for the city to fall because they have so many supplies inside, but the French king can basically do nothing to prevent it because he got beaten up so bad at Crécy. That event, Crécy, 1346, this is the first major land battle of the 100 Years' War. We do have a naval battle before this and some skirmishes, but this is the first massive battle of this. The English have, we think, around 13,000 men. That is a lot of men. That is a lot of men to have in the field in a pre-modern context, right? There's no train, rail lines bringing supplies all the time. So this is a city on the move in foreign territory. Lands with 13,000 men. Well, a little bit more than that, but it's about 13,000 by the time we get to Crécy. The French have way more, 20,000. Percentage-wise, I'm not going to do the math for you because I don't do numbers. That's my wife's job. She's financials. That's a lot more. That's a huge percentage more. This is not a good situation for the English. You're in foreign territory, hugely outnumbered, right? You've marched. I showed you how far they marched. They marched a long way. That's tiring, right? It would tire me out walking across savannah, and it's beautiful here, and paved, and there's nice people. Nobody's trying to kill me. And I'd be tired. They'd marched a long way. But nevertheless, they win. And this massive victory is recorded in dozens and dozens and dozens of sources across Europe. It's extraordinary. From Wales, we have Welsh sources. We have Italian sources. Of course, French and English sources. We've got sources in Czech, medieval Czech, which, my apologies to anybody who's medieval Czech in the room, but that language is not English. It's really hard to read. I was not wanting to do that, but I had to do it. There's been a strong tradition since 1704 of where this battle happened, and what I'm showing here is one of the earliest maps, in fact, probably the earliest map, that shows where the battle happened. I put it in red there. Don't worry, you can't see that. Just trust me, that's what it is. We're going to get tighter to it. One of the things that interested me about this battle is that the more I started looking at it, the less the story I was being told made sense. And I'm going to kind of work you through what I was told about this battle, and then hopefully what I saw as being like a problem with it. These red routes across the French landscape, this is the English. All right? These circles are where we know they camped. I'll get to you in a minute why I feel very confident about that. But our sources say that, in particular one source that's very, very, very important that nobody had looked at before says this. So if these are encampments, and then there's the battle, there's the traditional site up there. And I've shown where traditionally the red there, that's the English, and there's the French. And they, during the time that the English are doing all this jazz, they're in this town, which is a nice town. They're not sitting in tents, they're having a good time. And then they go up and get over, and then of course they all get wiped out, all right? That's the traditional story. Now, which route the English take to get to the traditional site, whether they go through this forest or around it, depends on the historian you talk to. I think anybody who thinks that you took 13,000 men, thousands of livestock, all the horses and the carts through the middle of a very thick forest in the Middle Ages has never been hiking. So that's where I stand on that. Here's what we know is true. It's on Wikipedia. This is the story that my professor taught me. There is this town of Crécy-en-Ponthieu. Up here on a ridgeline, the English take position. The French come up and take position on the other side of a valley. And from that point, the French begin assaulting in waves, going down into the valley, marching up into the teeth of the English, and dying. The first wave is of Genoese crossbowmen. Men who shoot crossbows. The Genoese crossbowmen are sent in. When they are repulsed by English longbow, they flee. And the French knights are so angry about that, they think this is such an act of cowardice that we are told in the myth of this that they decide to run them down with their horses, to slaughter their own allies because they perceive them as being cowardly. And then they proceed to get mowed down. And then the next wave comes in and they get mowed down, and so forth and so on for hours and hours and hours and hours until the sun goes down and the killing must stop because you can't see anymore. Why did people think it happened here and in this way? Well, let's go back to our painting, this magnificent painting. Because Story has done so many things magnificently here. I love this painting so much. One of the things he's done is he's shown this feature right back here, a windmill. There is a windmill back there. And according to one of our sources, but probably the most famous one because he was translated so early into English, Edward III watched the battle from a windmill. And when his son, who he had put in the front line, a 16-year-old kid, put him in charge of the front line, go get him, Tiger. Boy Scouts were different in those days. Sends him out there, and when some of the other knights, the English knights, are worried that the Black Prince, I'm calling him the Black Prince, he's not Black Prince yet, but we know him as that. When they're worried about him, he's like, my lord, he's out there by himself. Like, this is bad news. And we haven't heard from him in a bit. Maybe we should go help him. And they come to the windmill and ask his father, maybe you should do something about that. Send somebody out to help. And he says, this becomes quite a famous quote, "No, let the boy earn his spurs, because spurs are how you know who a knight is," which would be a profoundly stupid thing to say about the Crown Prince of England, because if he gets captured, the 100 Years' War is lost. But the point is the windmill. The windmill in which he supposedly says this, and that becomes an iconic thing that there's a windmill. Well, there is a windmill. There's a picture of it from a postcard. It's no longer there, but I was able to track down this postcard via the glory of eBay and buy it. That is a stone windmill. Most windmills are not made out of stone. You would only make it out of stone if it's a particularly wealthy windmill, which this one is because it was on the hill directly above the town of Crécy on Ponthieu. So you had a really nice windmill there, which is a very beautiful feature on the landscape. And if you think somebody fought in a battle of Crécy, somewhere near here, and a dude watched it from a windmill, there's your windmill. So this becomes a way of establishing where this is. There's also another feature called the Cross of Bohemia, supposedly where John of Bohemia died, where that scene in that famous painting takes place, supposedly here. It's 1.3 miles from that windmill, which is odd, because King John of Bohemia was blind. And what we know about how he died is that he said, when he was told, well, first of all, he was told what they were about to do, and he said, "We will lose." And they did it anyway. And then when they told him, "So turns out you were right, we're going to lose this battle," King John of Bohemia said, "I would rather die in the field with a sword in my hand than asleep abed a peaceful man." And he asked 2 knights from his retinue to take the reins of his horse and lead him into the thickest of the fighting so that he would die with his sword in the hand. We have zero reason to doubt that story. In part, we have zero reason to doubt that story because we have his body, and we know the wounds that he took. He was in the thick of the fighting, which would not be 1.3 miles away. So this is strange. In fact, this has no bearing whatsoever on Bohemia. This is a boundary marker akin to the sign that I passed on the way from Charleston today, welcoming me to Georgia. This is a boundary marker welcoming one to the Diocese of Crécy that has then, in popular myth, become established as something connected to John of Bohemia. Here's what the battle looks like in traditional maps. We've got, again, the English up here. There's that stone windmill, very glorious thing there. There's the town. There's a little river. Isn't that nice? Here's where the French are. And this is a heat map, hot color high, cool color low. So there's the valley that the French go down and die, and they just keep doing that until dark, which is poor military leadership, I will tell you. I was like, at the Citadel, I'm like, "So, cadets, what if I told you to do that?" And they're like, "No, sir." Respectfully, I decline. So there's some issues with this. First of all, no medieval source, none, describes the English seizing that town. The whole time after the battle, the king stays in his tent in the field. We know that. But if the king is here and wins this fight, he's going to stay at a house in town. He's not going to stay in his tent. He's a king, crying out loud. And also, the French aren't stupid. Like, this would be dumb. It would really, truly be very strange to imagine that they would do this. And it gets worse because you actually walk the field as I have, and there's a glacial escarpment right along the base of this. And I don't know how many of you have ridden horses, but if you try to take a horse down an escarpment that's taller than me, a ledge, if you will, if you try to charge down that on a horse, you don't get past that point. And it only takes one person like riding over that to be like, "You know what we should not do? That, right? We should not do that. Let's not charge over that little mini cliff. That's not good. That's not good." So this is a problem too. Now, the solution, I'm told by some of my colleagues, is that the French went through a bottleneck between the river and that escarpment, made an S-turn. No source describes such a thing. I can't find a medieval source describing such a tactic anywhere at any point, certainly not at this battle, so that they could get in proper position to die like we all assume they would. I can start to sense my animosity. So, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. No source describes that. Actually, in fact, no source describes this river either. That's weird. You'd think they would. Or just this escarpment, all this trouble they're having, no source describes that. And man, the French are really dumb if they're going to execute two 90-degree turns within easy access of the enemy. You don't do that. You want to hit me in the side where I don't have armor? That's not smart. Worse, why would they do any of that when there's a perfectly good road that stays on high ground that would allow them to just, ride up the flank of the English? That'd make more sense than going across that valley. Don't lose the high ground. I learned that in playground, like when I was in elementary school. Don't lose the high ground. King of the mountain. I know this stuff. We all do. Why don't you just follow the road and roll up your enemy? Win. And it gets worse. Because this road is the one that we know the French king took when he fled the field, which would be a very strange road to take because it's going right next to the enemy. That's a very bad thing to do. My colleague at West Point, apologies to any West Point graduates, my colleague at West Point says this is how the battle happened. He says, I see your points, so it must be rotated this way. And the French attacked through a river and a town uphill so that they could die. To which hopefully some of you are like, but wait, I think you just told us no source mentions that town, no source mentions that river. If we have a battle through a river, odds are someone's going to talk about it. Nobody does. Nobody does. And worse, there's that route that the French king took to flee. You don't flee into the backfield of your enemy. That's not smart. That's really profoundly not smart. So when I started seeing all this, I started feeling like I was crazy, right? Something's wrong with me because everybody's telling me the same thing and this isn't making sense. So I tried to make it make sense. Among the things I did was I located this document. This is a document that is now in the British Archive. It's sitting there. I was saying earlier this evening, it's not like I Indiana Jones this stuff. There was no, I had to climb through that thing and there was that fire I had to go through. I had to go to the main archive in England and say, can I see this document? And they said, sure, here it is. And I looked at it. And the document in question is, I call it the Kitchen Journal. It's a name I give to it, but because it doesn't really have a name. I mean, it has a name, but it's a big old manuscript name, shelf marker. What it is receipts. It's receipts about what happened on the campaign from the man running the king's kitchen. So every day, the man in charge of the king's kitchen wrote down what was used that day. And if you have a receipt in your pocket, at some point, look at it, and you'll notice a few things, because it will tell you what food you got, how much you paid, but it also tells you when you did that and where you were. Well, that's rather vital information, because it tells me exactly where the king was, exactly where he was. That's how I got this, because each one of those date markers is exactly where the king's camp was. Because they wrote it down, right? The guy in the kitchen, he doesn't know that he's doing this for Livingston all this time later. He's just like, and we were here, and the king had this many fish. What a glutton. That's it. That's all he's recording. But I'm like, this is gold because it gives us some amazing information, among which is the rate of speed of the army. I can now actually, on the ground, figure out how fast they go. Turns out they have a 1.3 kilometer an hour average marching speed. The best they did during the entire time was 2.2 kilometers per hour. That was on a very, very wide old Roman road along the Seine, basically a superhighway. They were cooking at 2.2. I'm also able to see where those encampments are, and it shows where they are. The distance to the traditional site from the previous encampment would have required them to go 4.2 kilometers per hour that day. and it's not on a superhighway. This is, I mean, some of my colleagues are telling me through a forest with all of that stuff. I don't see it. This is a problem. So when I put it all together, I got nothing. And worse, no evidence has been found. We've had multiple archaeological surveys of that site, nothing. So, apologies to Wikipedia. Nope. I don't think that's what happened. So where did this happen? I love this painting. Where did this actually happen? Where did it take place? I'd love to know. Well, let me see if I can find out. By doing a thing that, I borrow this from our intelligence services. I could tell you why, but I'd have to kill you. That's a joke, I'm sorry. All source analysis. Bringing together every source for the event that I could find in any language. Any language. The first one I got up there, there's the Kitchen Journal. We actually know the guy who wrote it, William Retford. There's another itinerary, matches it perfectly, and it seems to be totally independent from it. Fantastic. Collins de Beaumont, that third one there. Nobody had ever bothered to look at this because it was a poem. And people thought, well, that's not history, that's a poem. Well, I read it. First of all, it's the most heart-wrenching poem I've ever read. I've read a lot. Turns out it was heart-wrenching because it's written on the field of battle 3 days later by a herald, a French herald, who was called in to try to identify the dead. He's a herald. It's his job to be able to read coats of arms, right, and know, as you know, the tie, right, to be able to see that symbol on the tie, and that's that coat of arms. That's the crown prince. That's his job. And the bodies were in such bad shape that that's how they had to identify them. What's that guy wearing? Who is that? That's his job. And he wrote a poem about it on the field. Extraordinary. And it had been ignored for 600 years because people didn't want to read poetry, I guess. We have letters written on the field, a whole bunch of these. It turns out from 1346 to 1400, I was able to locate 81 primary sources for this. In medieval terms, that is unreal to have that many. And they are in something like 11 different languages. And they tell us pretty consistently some basic clues. They say that the battle happened between two towns, Abbeville and Crécy-en-Ponthieu, that it happened en route to Crécy-en-Ponthieu. That's that town that I said no evidence is that he took it. They all say he was going towards it, though. He didn't take it, but he was going towards it. It was near the forest of Crécy. Given what I was able to figure out about the rates of speed, it's 11 to 13 kilometers from the previous camp. I have a search radius. It needs to be on the Mont of Crécy, the Mount of Crécy, which doesn't necessarily mean a mountain in French, just like a rise in the landscape. High ground. Follows the roads. There's no indication they go off-road. They stay on the roads, which of course they would, because they're trying to get away, the English are. And it needs to be in a field west of a church. And I've got this feller, because it tells me where they are. In Latin. And what it says is that on the 24th of August, they were under the forest of Crécy. This dark patches here, that's all the forest of Crécy. They were under the forest of Crécy. Yeah, we know where that is because they had just crossed the Somme, which will later be in World War I, Battle of the Somme. They crossed here and they spent the night next to the river. The next, they were in the forest of Crécy. And we're told they were near these small towns right in here. They were somewhere kind of triangulated right in this area. And then the next night, time of the battle, they were still beside the forest of Crécy. And the next night, the night after the battle, they were in camp under the eaves of the forest of Crécy. Edward III himself says that the battle happened on the other side of the forest from where he was the night before. The dude who won on the battlefield is talking about this. The traditional site you see up here, well, that's not between these two towns. It's not en route to it. and it doesn't quite match this. And of course, we've already seen it's too far. When I put together all of the clues, it all pointed me to a spot right here. And I've put in this Priory of Domvast. If I've got time, yeah, I'll have time. Cool, cool, cool. I'll show you a picture of something that just got found this week that's kind of important. Don't anybody let the cat out of the bag. I haven't published on it yet, so. But I'll tell you, this matches everything. It matches everything. That's where the battle happened. At least that's what my evidence all says, right? What I need is artifacts. That's what I need. And I'm not an archaeologist, and the French government is really not keen to give people permission to dig up more information about the battle they lost at. Really bad. But otherwise, all the evidence I've got says there's where it was. And in fact, when I zoom in on that spot, these are Napoleonic maps, I see place names that start to match up with my sources. A number of my sources talk about the battle happening the Hearse, at the Hearse. There's the place name, the Hearse. There's a field name. Here's a field name called the Garden of Genoese. Genoese? We're in the middle of northern France. Why would anybody talk about a low ground on this landscape and talk about it as a place affiliated with the Genoese? Well, there was this event, the Battle of Crécy, in which the Genoese crossbowmen went in first, remember, and all got wiped out. Oh. And this is high ground right above it. All this is high ground. That's the low ground. Yeah, if they were coming in there facing a storm of longbow, yeah, I bet they died. Right there, right where it says Garden of Genoese. I marched it off. It's the correct yardage. I know how far a longbow will shoot. There's a picture of it. There's me. It's that. It's a younger me. That's a younger me. Stand there going, why do you want me to stand here? Well, I want us to stand there to show the difference in height between the English position and where the Garden of the Genoese is, where these guys would have come marching up. They had never faced the longbow like this before. It's no wonder they lost. It's no wonder. The Genoese crossbowmen were actually sent in without their shields. They didn't even have their full armor on because the French thought, just go in there and just, shoot some crossbows at the English and then kind of get out of the way and we'll storm through and kill them all. Don't worry. And they walked up there, and crossbows take a long time to load and a longbow does not. Didn't get very far. Which means that this big field, the French position would be down there, the English would be on high ground, beyond these trees up here. That's where the Garden of Genoese is. That's where all these men died. I think. I can't know because I don't have archaeological evidence. It's where everything says it makes sense. It also starts to make sense of why all these guys died. Because in fact, that Garden of Genoese is a bowl in the landscape. From where the French are, you can't see that it's there. What would have happened is the lines would have gone forward, dropped out of view, and then there would have been screaming. And the French probably assumed we're winning. Send in the next line. Send in the next line. Send in the next line. And that bowl is completely covered in onslaught fire by longbow. It's absolutely horrific to imagine what this must have been like. But it now suddenly, this isn't, I mean, was it, from a bird's eye view, this was profoundly dumb that they were doing this. But on the ground, it probably looked like, we got them, boys. We got them. Send in more strength. Didn't work until night fell. It actually turned out there were 2 days of the battle. That was a shock when I got to the sources. All this continues the next day, which was kind of frightening. Which enables me now to rebuild how the engagement happened, because I know where the roads are, and so I'm able to reconstruct it. Phase 1 occurred when you had the French army actually coming onto the field by two routes. That was their first problem. If any of you have military experience, maybe even business experience, you know that command structures are important. In the military, we call it command and control. You lose command and control on the battlefield, and there's a very, very unlikely chance of you having success. You must maintain command and control, and they did not. From the start, because the Army arrived via two roads. One, went too far here. One from the south, passing the priory of Domvast. I'll come back to it. This is so cool, this thing here, Domvast. Trust me. Part of them goes this way. Part of them is coming down this way. Reason for that being that they didn't know where the English were. When they realized where the English are, their army is already split on down two roads. You have 20,000 men and all of those supplies. They don't go by one road. They go by multiple roads. And when you can track out where they were when they found the news, I can see that they would have been at two different junctions on roads. So this is how it would have happened, which means they're approaching the field by two directions. You already have a command and control problem. And they decide that they're going to attack what they perceive to be the weakest part of the English line. That's the Garden of the Genoese. And so the lines start smashing in there. Now, what Edward has done is has set up his field with archers all along these forests and all along wagons on this high ground. He surrounded his position with wagons, turned them on their side, axles to the ground is what one of our sources, or axles to the sky is how one of our sources describes it. Turned them on their side to make a field fortification, makeshift walls, basically, right? He's effectively circled the wagons, as we say in Colorado, where I come from. But he's left a big gap right in the middle. Right there, there's a gap facing the French. Come hit me here, he says. He's doing that because he wants the French to charge him, because he's got longbows to either side ready to pummel them. So yes, please come run at me here. It's a trap. And he baits that trap. And we all know who he baits the trap with. The Black Prince. The 16-year-old Crown Prince of England. Why would you put him in the front line? Bait. The man's got banners all over the place. He's got this beautiful coat of arms with that shield all over it. I am the Crown Prince of England. Capture me and this is all over. And this is the gap in the wagons. And so after those initial attacks at the Garden of Genoese fail, here they came. Here they came, storming in to try and get him. And that's when that young man almost cost his father the war. Because our sources are absolutely clear on this, that aren't English. The English sources say, let that boy earn his spurs. That's not what the other sources say. Everyone else who's at that battle says that the English prince went forward from his position to meet the French. I don't know why. Nobody knows why. None of the sources say why. They just say that he did that. They say that the next day his father publicly, in front of the army, chastised him, was yelling at him. You idiot. You almost cost me everything. Because by abandoning that position, this whole plan is awry. You go and engage out there in the middle of the field, and all those longbowmen can no longer just shoot at the enemy. They might shoot you, kid. And nobody wants to be the dude who shot the Crown Prince in the back. In fact, our sources that are not English all say the kid goes out there, is surrounded, and surrenders. The Black Prince surrendered at the Battle of Crécy. He sat down on his knees. He knelt. That is the absolute sign of surrender. His bannerman, we know his name, laid his banner, this huge banner that would have said, this is the Crown Prince, laid it at his feet to say, that is the Crown Prince. Do not kill that man. Take him for ransom. You kill him, and he's nothing to you. Take him for ransom, and you get a literal king's ransom for him, and end this war. Laid the banner at his feet. He's captured by the French. The only reason he gets away is because the French start arguing over who gets to claim the ransom. And they start fighting each other. Actually, one lord kills another lord. No, he's mine, and kills that guy. And another lord is like, how dare you kill another lord, and kills that guy. And the Black Prince is like, and leaves, right? Starts scurrying away. And at that moment, the Bishop of Durham on the English side has surged forward to try and save him, grabs him, and pulls him out. The king, meanwhile, so affrighted by what might be happening out there, has actually left the lines. He doesn't say, let the boy earn his spurs. He goes on a dead run, gets on horse, and blows through his own lines and makes a sweep of the field trying to save the kid. That's what really happened. But the French are repulsed. Nightfall came, and it ended. Now, I go through a lot more detail in my book on this that came out last year. But I do want to note, as I said, one more little detail. And this is a detail that I'm like literally working on. This afternoon, I was on my phone poking away, trying to get more of the data for this, for publishing this. So again, don't tell anybody. Where I put the English position stands this memorial. I've known this for some years. I've not told anybody. I'm like shocked nobody's bothered to look at it. I haven't told anybody because I didn't have enough information about it. I'm getting that information now. If you were to read this slab here, it says that this is a memorial to the dead of Crécy, the Battle of Crécy, 1346. This is nowhere near where that should be. Nowhere near where it should be. And this week, I actually found an account from the abbot of the Priory of Domvast, the one right next door, who says, oh yeah, that marker, that's where the Battle of Crécy happened. And that marker was put up. The original marker was a red wooden cross called the Red Cross. And it was put up on that site by my distant predecessor, the abbot of the Priory of Domvast, who put it up on the request of the people, the inhabitants of the area, who Edward had forced to bury the dead here. And that's why we put that up. And it was red for the blood that was shed there. And in time, in centuries later, they replaced the wood cross with this one. And it's been there ever since, he said, in that spot. And then he included a picture of it with a map to make sure we all knew where it was. So, I'm still working the case, is what I'll say. And I'm still very interested in finding out what was the reality behind this magnificent, magnificent artwork. Thank you. Do you have any questions?